The Octopus Hitman. Listener discretion advised.
Philip Arthur Thompson, once a fledgling killer, has descended into madness. No longer content with mere murder, Thompson has evolved into a deranged psychopath, delighting in the torment and chaos he inflicts. His reign of terror has left a trail of shattered lives and haunting memories, marking his transformation into a true monster.
And welcome to The Octopus Hitman. This is episode 5, Becoming the Monster. I am your host, Bill. To my right, I have Mark.
Hello.
And to my left, I have James.
Howdy.
And this is kind of getting into the weeds now. Last episode, we talked about Phillip Arthur Thompson and all of the stuff he was getting into from 1970 or maybe early as 67.
Correct.
Till 75. This episode, we're starting to delve into some serious stuff, if rape and murder wasn't already as serious, right?
Yeah, he's really going down the road of badness at this point.
Yeah, so it's 75 to about 80 is what we're going to cover in this particular episode.
Yeah, it's not good. I mean, he is truly becoming the monster, and I don't think it's by choice. I think just factors that he's done are pushing him farther and farther along, or he truly has psychopathic tendencies.
Yeah. Well, if you remember, the very first time he was institutionalized, he went to a mental hospital. So there's got to be something there, and it just snowballed.
And he's not around anyone who's helping him. It's just hurting him. Everything else he does, it's just affecting how he behaves.
Yeah.
Well, he's seen he can get away with it.
Yeah.
There is a lot of stuff. And, you know, when we were researching this, it was difficult to get. We know what happened, but we don't know everything.
I don't think anyone, except for maybe the Betty Clore trial, put everything in a logical timeline.
Exactly.
When you go out researching Philip Arthur Thompson, you could get anything from 1968 to 1979, back to 1972, and then up into 84. You're like, what is going on?
Yeah, it's very convoluted. But right now, I guess we're going to get into it.
So we'll start in 1971 with our first episode, The Murder of Betty Clore.
Yep.
In 72, just a year later, Thompson was convicted of forgery and assault. We don't know a lot of details of that because this is, like we just said, there's so many convictions, but there's not a lot of meat to it that we could find. In 75, he was convicted of being a felon in possession of a firearm and forgery conversion.
Right. And there's not a lot on this.
No. So he's got a firearm. He's doing forgery, which is one of his original convictions, passing bad checks.
Right. Remember, my mother told me she knew he was in jail for passing bad checks.
Correct.
Correct.
And if you remember the previous podcast, a firearm wasn't mentioned until episode 4, when he was actually with Melinda Montgomery pulling a gun saying, you keep your mouth shut or I'm blowing your face off.
Right.
Correct. In 76, he was convicted of solicitation to commit murder and of being an accessory after the fact.
Yeah.
In 78, he escaped from the Sierra Conservation Center. So now he's escaping places. He's convicted of trying to commit murder. We already know he committed murder. He's just on a rampage. Then in 1979, he escaped from prison and was once again convicted of being a felon in possession of a firearm.
Right. So lots of guns constantly.
Correct. But now we'll try and focus on a bigger story, and that was the 1975 murder of Ronald Winter, a gun dealer, execution style.
So I heard that Ronald Winter was someone that Thompson knew possibly before the murder in 75.
So Winter was to testify in a weapons case. Winter was an informant for the Sacramento City Sheriff's Department Detective Pat O'Neill. The homicide was investigated by Sac PD Detective Robert Waters, who later was elected Sac Sheriff and even later was elected to the Sacramento City Council.
Yeah, if you are a Sacramento native, you recognize the name Robbie Waters. He was a sheriff for a long time. He was very popular.
Correct. Thompson was accused of the April 26 murder of Ronald Winter. He was 36 years old. He was suspected by authorities of involvement in illegal gun traffic. His body, riddled with 12 bullets from an automatic military rifle, was found near their San Juan Road overpass and Interstate I-5, which here in Sacramento is just kind of on the outskirts a little bit. Winter was not in the military, but he seemed to be what's called a spook himself. He was reportedly seen taking hops on military transports traveling between the U.S. and Southeast Asia. Winter was reportedly a licensed gun dealer and seemed to have run with a rather sketchy group of acquaintances. But according to the sources, he was not involved in criminal activity himself.
Right. So he is, a spook is usually like a spy or someone in the shadow government,
Correct.
Something like that. So he knows him beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's running in circles, like with some government shadow type of guy, this Ronald Winter.
Well, and he's an informant.
Right.
Well,
exactly.
and Philip Arthur Thompson at one point was tagged as an informant. Whether or not he was is something to be discussed. At the same time, so was Betty Clure. So you never know what's real and what's not. This is one of those convoluted areas that you're like, is this true?
Yeah, because I can never find actual proof that Betty Clure was an informant.
Right. It's just speculation.
It's just speculation.
But you got to wonder, was police work back in the day where they just used a lot of people to give them information?
Yeah.
Right? It's like now we can do it on the internet, but I think back then, hey, let's get a bunch of people that run in these circles and let them tell on each other and we can figure out where
Or
the
I
drugs
see
are.
you at the bar and I pull you over. I'm not going to give you a DUI, but you're going to rat for me.
Right.
Right? I'm not going to
Exactly.
press any charges. You see anything funky around here, you come tell me.
Yeah, so like how important really is an informant? It really just could be a guy that's going to snitch on somebody.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
To cover their own ass.
Right.
Right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be high level. Like I said, it could be something simple. We're not going to press charges on you, but you see anything suspicious here, you let us know.
Gotcha.
So, Philip Arthur Thompson was in prison at some point during this time. And he knew a Thomas Foster.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about that is that he shared a cell and he gave some stories to Thomas Foster about, there was an individual he knew called General Field Marshal Sinque.
Oh, okay.
And General Field Marshal Sinque is famous when you research him for being involved with the SLA, Sudanese Liberation Army. And what's crazy about that is that Sinque walked out of Soledad prison, literally walked out. Nobody noticed him, completely free, gets out. And he actually is the one who planned the Patty Hearst kidnapping.
Yeah.
And possibly the guns that Ronald Winter knew about or that Philip Arthur Thompson had access to were used in part of that kidnapping for Patty Hearst. So again, your father is connected to these famous events,
Right.
whether on the periphery or directly involved.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And it just keeps, it's like, is it a coincidence? This is just weird. It's just weird stuff.
It's just weird. So a man named Michael Balzerini, who was brought from the Los Angeles County Jail to testify against Thompson in the Winter case. Balzerini maintained Thompson had put a contract out for the murder of Winter. The motive, according to Balzerini, was to stop Winter from testifying against Thompson in another unrelated case. Judge Robert W. Cole quashed a grand jury murder indictment in the death penalty case because the district attorney failed to tell the grand jurors both the good and bad about the defendant Thompson.
Yeah.
That was a Supreme Court decision, right?
Cole's decision was a temporary victory for attorney Clyde Blackman, who claimed that Deputy District Attorney Ken Reeves violated the rights of Philip A. Thompson. Correct. It was a California Supreme Court decision,
Gotcha.
not a U.S. Supreme Court.
So this is something back in the 70s that they decided that, hey, you can't just tell a one-sided story about somebody. Is this something that's true today? Like you have to say, yeah, Jeffrey Dahmer, he's a great guy. He walks old ladies across the street and he eats people.
Huh.
Right? Are you supposed to do that? Is that still a thing?
I've never seen it.
So it was in the 70s, obviously.
because the indictment was dismissed under a case called Johnson versus Superior Court, in which the state Supreme Court held that when a district attorney seeking an indictment is aware of evidence reasonably tending to negate guilt, he is obligated to inform the grand jury. In this case, the evidence was that Thompson was a police informer and furnishing information on another murder case allegedly involving Winter. This, Blackman declared, should have been told to the jury because it showed that Thompson had a motive for keeping Winter alive rather than killing him.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. And here's the other thing. We, for the life of us, we cannot find out what the unrelated case is.
Correct. Here's
Right.
my favorite part. Thompson, a county jail prisoner, was technically free for a few seconds after Cole's ruling, but then he was rearrested and charged over again with the crimes of soliciting to commit murder. So he's like,
Okay.
woohoo, I'm off. Ah, shoot.
Right.
I'm arrested again.
Right.
So this murder took place in Sacramento,
Correct.
near Sacramento. I know it was
It's
actually
technically in Sacramento.
San Juan Boulevard and 80, which is kind of insane because you can pass it all the time and you just never think about these things happening in real life. I mean, murder, death, horrible crimes happen all around us and we just never pay attention or see them.
If you drive by this area now, you do. There's like a lot of homeless camps. There's areas have been burned down. I drove by it and I was like, that looks like a perfect spot for a murder, actually.
Oh, there you go.
I literally went on a tour this weekend, not on purpose, but it was like, oh, he went there, he raped there, he killed there. It was like, holy crap, what am I doing here? Right?
I do want to share something, though, that Philip Arthur Thompson had a different story about how Ronald Winter died when he gave his testimony in court.
Right. So, again, to be clear, he was riddled with 12 bullets.
Correct.
12 bullets, execution style.
Yeah,
So,
in the chest.
Yeah.
And so he was killed right by his car under that overpass. So Philip Arthur Thompson says he was traveling with Ronald Winter to meet others, and he was warning him, hey, there's a third party that's out to get us. We need to be really careful. As they're driving, another vehicle opens fire. They wind up like pulling off and getting into a chase and stopping, and the bullets come flying as they're trying to meet this other person. Ronald Winter is getting shot, and Philip Arthur Thompson ducks and starts to run. And he says he runs to the nearest house and a farm nearby.
Correct.
And he makes a phone call to the police to say, this is what's happening.
Hear the zing of a bullet
It's
past his
not
head.
like today where you call 911 and the recording's there. So we don't know if he's telling the truth or he's not telling the truth, because when they called the police back then, it was like, hello, Sacramento Police Department. It's like, can you hold, please? My cat ran away. So it's not the same. You're not going to get the recording like you do today. So we don't know if he's telling the truth. We don't know if he's the one who killed Ronald Winter or if this third party supposedly killed Ronald Winter, but you think they would still be hunting Philip Arthur Thompson.
well, if Thompson made the call, did he go back and meet the police there and say, hey, here he is, he's dead, and this is what happened?
I don't think Philip Arthur Thompson had a good relationship with the police. I don't know.
You think? Well, in some cases he did. I think that he would charm them.
Yeah.
But just remember, he's really charismatic, he's really intelligent, and don't believe a word he says.
Well, and keep in mind, don't forget, he was shot 12 times with some kind of military or automatic weapon.
okay, so the interesting thing about Ronald Winter is he was actually going to testify about a case concerning stolen weapons from Mather Air Force Base. And it's been widely thought of by law enforcement that Philip Arthur Thompson was a person who actually stole those weapons from Mather Air Force Base.
Which is why I think the connection of Philip Arthur Thompson wanted Ronald Winter dead was because Ronald Winter was going to testify against him that he had stolen those guns.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, now I'm believing Ronald Winter over Philip Arthur Thompson. The funny part about the murder of Ronald Winter, which is not even humorous, but the irony is that a couple of years later after his death, there's a fire in the Sacramento home of Philip Arthur Thompson. The fire investigators and police department show up because 2 guns are found in his attic, burnt. And one of them is an assault rifle, which the police believed was used in the murder of Ronald Winter.
Correct.
And they found another gun, which was unregistered, and then they found a shotgun also in the house.
Correct.
So he was not a firearms user until a little bit later, but when he was a user of firearms, he went all out. So that particular case of when he's convicted of solicitation to commit murder puts him in jail. That's where he is. And so he's serving some time. And ironically, as with many other moments in his past serving time, he either escapes or he gets out early. And in this case, he literally escapes the Soledad and walks away. It's amazing to me. It's almost like he has assistance. You know, is he a spook? Is he getting help from the government? Is he just that intelligent that he's able to escape or get off early all these times?
Or the guard's just not looking at that point.
Is he paying them off? I mean, it happened back then.
Yeah. And maybe he did have a good relationship with the cops. I've heard that he talked to them and had good relationships with them when he was in jail. And so maybe they did look the other way and say, I mean, that'd be crazy. But
Well,
still.
if he's an informant, it could be, hey, we're letting him go.
Exactly.
Is it like a camp and he can just pretty much walk away? No one's watching him?
I don't know. I think they're normally watched pretty closely back then. But he's recaptured, sent to another facility, and guess what? You want to guess? Because I can tell you, he escapes again.
Well, I know that there was one time, and I read it, and I don't know where it falls into this, but he was let out for good behavior as after he escaped from jail. I do not know in what world you're going to be let out for good behavior once you've escaped already. It's crazy.
It is crazy. And I mention it because there's even a theory that he was in Folsom Prison and escaped that. I don't know at this point. Literally, I would believe anything you tell me about Philip Arthur Thompson.
Well, and I'd like to know who his lawyer was through all this.
I know. You've been saying that for 3 episodes.
Yeah.
I mean, laws are different all over the place. In 1975, was it, you get 2 years for murder and you get 18 months for good behavior or something and you just get out?
Yeah. It's crazy.
It's crazy. So he's moved on. We didn't find any more context around his used automobile lot. We didn't hear any more context around his massage parlor or the hair salon or the medical supply company. It just kind of fades into history.
But it's all sketch, though.
But there's no bankruptcy. It just goes away.
Right.
Along with everything else. Maybe he's been arrested too many times and then all his licenses are pulled. I'm not sure. But it just goes away. And so he moves on to other things.
Correct. And now we're going to move on to 1980 and the UPS hijackings. So Thompson and his partner James Dunnigan planned and executed 2 UPS truck hijackings in San Mateo County in December 1980. They discussed their plans at a warehouse they rented, which housed guns and stolen UPS uniform. On December 24th, they hijacked a UPS truck driven by James Matson. They bound Matson, stole the packages, and threatened him to mislead the police by claiming the robbers were black. They unloaded the goods at the warehouse and attempted to erase the evidence. Thompson said that he had fronts that he could sell the goods through.
You know, he has a warehouse in the Bay Area. So I don't know how much time he was spending up in Sacramento now, around the 1980s, since he basically walked away and escaped those prisons and everything else. I don't know if he distanced himself from Sacramento or if he just went, I'm going to refocus back to the Bay Area. Because a lot of his next crimes are occurring there, so he has a warehouse that he stores a lot of his stuff in.
Well, it's also close enough he could be based out of here and he's doing stuff there.
Possibly.
Moving around. So on December 30th, just 6 days later, they replicated the crime with UPS driver Daniel Smith.
So they did the crime a second time.
Following the exact same method, they hijacked a truck, bound him, unloaded the packages at the warehouse, and threatened him just like the other driver. The crime spree ended on January 14th, 1981, when Inspector Anatole Balmy, acting on a tip, surveilled the warehouse and arrested them after they attempted to leave in a stolen truck.
A little known fact I do know is that he had that warehouse for 6 years when he was in the Bay Area. And he also, according to what I've read at this time, was the manager or at least the superintendent of the Tower Apartments in the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
So he was still trying to do multiple things while committing crimes. I don't know if he's trying to uphold some kind of honest living. No, don't think so.
No, he's just trying to get money. He's got schemes all over. That's just who he is. He's got 3 businesses. We're going to rob trucks. They robbed a truck, and 6 days later, they robbed another one.
And what's so weird is, I mean, I know that they robbed them because it was right around Christmas time, and they figured lots of people are giving gifts back and forth.
Well, he also picked there because it crossed 2 different counties, and he knew the police would have a hard time.
Oh,
exactly.
Following the crime spree.
Prosecuting the crime because it's in 2 different jurisdictions.
But it's interesting because he had a partner in crime, the James Dunnigan character, and he would do stuff like go to his mom's house and give her gifts.
From the stolen merchandise.
Right.
Chocolates, wine.
Ice skates.
Right. And he had a lot of clothes. And it's like, is it worth it? Like, my point is that he's supposed to be so intelligent, but is it really worth it to go to jail for wine and cheese and a cheese slicer?
But you have to wonder, is that the stuff that he couldn't
Fence?
Yeah, that he couldn't fence. He was fencing some of the bigger items, and that's just stuff that what fence is going to buy chocolate and some dresses.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
He might be fencing electronics, jewelry.
But he did kidnap them,
Correct.
And of course,
And
scared
threatened
the
him.
crap out of him,
And
right?
threatened him. Yep.
So I know that they actually were so scared of Thompson that they told the police, yeah, it was black guys or Mexican guys or something like that who did this.
Correct.
So they were on a little wild goose chase for a while.
Because they took their driver's license, their address, and they said, we know who you are.
Exactly. I'd be scared too if I had a family.
Yeah.
Right? And again, Thompson's a pretty intimidating guy.
Well, again, back then, if they have all your information, the police aren't going to protect you 24/7.
No.
We know where you live, and we're going to come after you if you say anything.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is my theory too. Remember when we were talking on episode 3 where I had talked to him and he said that he went to jail for 3 strikes and you're out. And he told me it was because he stole Oriental rugs for insurance purposes and he hijacked a truck. I actually think he modified that. And it was really the UPS hijackings. That was really what he did.
And maybe he had a scam that we don't know about with rugs.
Exactly. All of these could be true, but there is nothing that we found through our research that he hijacked an Oriental rug truck,
Do you
right?
guys know how expensive real Oriental or Asian rugs are? There's thousands and thousands of dollars.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So can you imagine getting the insurance money for that?
And then turning around and fencing it.
And from what I understand, in that particular case, he was using this money to buy guns. And this all fits in with Ronald Winter and him taking the guns overseas, and maybe they're selling them to other entities across the world.
How do you get quick cash? That would make sense right there.
Right.
Insurance, fence them, get cash for guns, and yeah, you're on.
Well, it's much more cash than stealing UPS trucks, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Right.
If you're selling guns.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if he gets well, he wouldn't get $100,000. I don't
Depends on
think.
how many rugs you got.
Yeah. But yeah, with the rugs, for sure. And UPS trucks the same. If every one of his robberies and attempts to steal from people, all that money went to guns so that he could get more money from a foreign agency, this all makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
And finally, in 1981, there's Arthur Sewell. Arthur W. Sewell, under protective custody for 5 months, is finally free after Phillip Arthur Thompson, who robbed his antique store of over $173,000 in jewels, was found guilty of robbery and firearm use. Despite the conviction, Thompson remains free on bail pending an appeal.
Again, how?
Yeah.
He's been in jail or medical facilities at least 6 or 7 times.
And think about that, 173,000 in 1980. That's like almost
That's a lot of
700,000.
money.
And that buys a lot of guns, my friend.
Well, let's think. Who paid his bail? He remains free on bail
Yeah.
pending an appeal, that would happen to all of us. We could get out on bail pending an
Sure.
appeal if you make the bail. And what is bail? I had to think they didn't go, okay, your bail is $2,000. It had to be a fairly high amount.
Again, I'm posing the question because it's going to come back possibly later, where there is someone, something, somehow helping him.
Oh, there's
Every time.
So Sewell's store was robbed on February 10th, 1981, and Thompson, with a violent criminal history, was released on bail in September. Sheriff's deputies moved into Sewell's home for his protection.
Yeah, you know why, right? We talked about it last episode. Stephen Ross, who was just going to talk about how these 2 guys burned a car. Nope, dead in Stockton.
Yeah.
Everybody,
Ronald Winter, who's
Ronald
going to
Winter,
testify.
dead under a bridge.
Yeah.
It's-
They all know.
Everybody who has something to say about Phillip Arthur Thompson takes it to their grave.
Yeah, it's crazy.
At the trial, Thompson was found guilty through a plea bargain. He faced up to 8 years in prison if his appeal fails, and other charges related to receiving stolen property and possession of a firearm. Sewell criticized the legal system for keeping him captive while the accused was free and praised the police for their protection. His business suffered significantly, leaving him to rebuild his life.
It's lucky he had a life.
They knew, like you guys said, he's out on bail because honestly, you could have probably said no bail, but they set a bail amount. He makes it and he's out free, like any of us could. But they know Sewell's going to get whacked.
Oh, yeah.
And
And he was basically a prisoner in his own home for 6 months.
Yes.
He can't do his store. I think his store ended up going
out of
under,
business.
right?
He had to recreate it.
Literally, he goes out of business now, right? What is the justice in this?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how do you even set a bail amount? No bail. You're a flight risk at that point.
Right. But
You've
then
escaped and walked out of places.
There's got to be some sort of thing where they just say, hey, a robbery is this much bail, and this is how we have to set it legally.
But you would think with his criminal history, they would be like, no bail.
Yeah.
You would think. That's the point.
You're a flight risk.
He knows people. He's got something.
Yeah.
And I think you said it correctly at the beginning of the episode. I mean, he has become a monster. If you were to look at him and you were to know all this and you meet Philip Arthur Thompson, I would be giving him a wrong name and letting him know that I am deaf, blind, and mute. I mean, because I don't want to be near this guy. He is a danger to everyone he comes in contact with.
He definitely is causing a lot of chaos.
Yeah. And what's so interesting is that we have the next episode. It just doesn't stop there.
No, he meets crazy, crazy people in his life even further.
And partners up with them.
Hennessy, Abbott, all these influencers of a much different kind than we talk about today.
You're going to enjoy episode 6.